Hi guys, I'm just going to do a brief run through of the client job spec template. It's all there in writing, but I just wanted to run through verbally as well, so sometimes it gives a bit better context. So essentially we'll go from start to finish. So this is the situation. You've ended up connecting with the client on the phone and you've managed to get them in a position where they're open to letting you work on a role for them. So you now need to ask a series of questions. Now if you fuck it up and you forget to ask something, don't worry too much. Like, you can go back, or you can shoot them an email, or you can just be like, oh, sorry, missed this one detail, could you please clarify? But if we can get as much detail as possible on the first phone call, you've already done the hard part. You've already got them to a position where they're willing to give you the job to work on. So that's the main hurdle, actually getting to that point. Now you've got a warm client, or warm-ish client, and they're giving you a role to work on. So part of this is going to be gauging all of the details about the role. You're also going to want to gauge their commitment too. So some people will just feel too awkward to say no on the phone, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, I'd see an engineer or whatever the role is, and then the next time you try to call them about an engineer, they just won't answer. So try and gauge their commitment on the phone too. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's literally one out of many phone calls that you're going to make. So you've done well if you've got to this stage, and now's the time to gauge some information. So firstly, company name. You're already going to know the company name, but I've got it in the document just so that you can have everything in a concise place. Contact name. Again, if you're calling this person, I would hope that at this stage you know their name. What's their position within the business? So this might not be as obvious, especially if it's a small business. They might be called the manager, but they could own the business. If it's a small business that turns over, I don't know, under 5 mil or something, they don't necessarily have all of their LinkedIn updated and things like that. So gauge what they do within the business and who they manage, etc. Head office location. This is an important one because they may have multiple locations. So just to assume that because their head office is in one place, that your candidate will be working that place, it might not be. So just ask the question, where's the head office location? Is it a national or is it a local business? So if it's a local business, they're probably just the one branch. They may only have one physical location, if any physical locations. So yeah, national or local business. Now, we're going to move on to the specifics of the role. You ask them, what do your current hiring needs look like? So I used to ask, what's your most urgent role? But then you discount their less urgent roles. They might have a few, but if you just ask them what the most urgent one is, they're just going to tell you the most urgent one. So I've sort of switched that up. What do your current hiring needs look like? How long have you been trying to fill these positions? So that gives you a gauge as to whether it's a brand new role, because if it is, they've probably got job adverts up. They're probably exploring their own avenues. They may be reaching out to other recruiters as well. If they've been trying to fill this position for quite a while, it also gives you the indication that maybe this is a difficult position. Maybe they're quite picky with who they're going to hire, which is not a bad thing, but it just gives you a bit of context to start asking questions around. Is this a newly created position? Oh, Riley. Sorry for that transition. I was getting pestered by the cat. Is this a newly created position, or is it somebody that's left the business that you're trying to replace? If it's a newly created position, it gives you an indication that perhaps they're changing up the way that they're structured, or maybe they're experiencing some growth, which is usually a good thing, but you can ask some questions around that. If somebody's left the position, maybe ask why. Like, what was the situation there? Could be totally fine. Could be that person's retired, or it could be that person was in the business for 8 years and now they've just decided to move on, which is totally normal. Or maybe there was an issue with that position. Maybe they were working underneath someone that's difficult to work underneath. They're not going to tell you that on the phone if that is the case, but just it gives you something to think about with regards to what that role is about. What will the average daily responsibilities be for the successful candidate in this role? Now you can ask that. That's a bit of a mouthful. You can ask that however you want, but what are they going to be doing in a day? It gives you something to relay to the candidate. If you just say, it's an operations manager role, that could mean a number of different things. If you say to them, it's an ops manager role, you're going to be managing XYZ person, you're going to be responsible for overseeing, ABC. You are also going to be managing safety in this role. The more specifics about the role, the more confident you're going to make the candidate feel, and more information the better. Is this a full-time permanent position, or are you hiring specifically for a certain job or project? Now, this one's important because even though, if someone's paying a recruitment fee, they're probably going to be hiring for a reasonable amount of time. If it's a contract-based position, you need to know that, because you're only going to be getting, if it's a 6-month contract, you're going to be getting half a fee for this. You may have roles that are better to work on. How that typically works is it's on a prorated charge rate. So if you've got a 6-month contract, you'd work out their annual salary and you'd divide it by 2. And then if they stay longer than 6 months, you can then charge for the rest of that down the line. But yeah, contract roles you're not going to get as much as if you're going to place someone in a full-time position. Also, if you just assume that this is a full-time role, and then they go in there and they interview and they say, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's just for the project, it paints you in a bad light. You haven't asked the right questions. The candidate's probably going to, if the candidate has one set of expectations and the company has a different set of expectations and they don't marry up, everyone's wasting their time. The candidate views you poorly, the client views you poorly, and you're not going to make a placement if they have different aspirations as to where they're going. Where will the location of the work be for this person? So again, you can't just assume that because their office is in one location, that's where they're going to be working. You just have to ask the question. It might be a remote role. It might be that they're going to, a different office or a different site that you don't know about. Maybe it's a site-based position if you work in construction or an industry where there are sites that they set up and move around, and the job site changes. Who will this person be reporting to? So that's going to be important to paint a picture as to the hierarchy within the business, the organizational structure. If this is called a project manager position, but they report to the director, it's probably a position of more responsibility than if it was a PM that reports to a senior PM, or, there's different levels there's more tiers within the structure. That also happens differently between a smaller business and a larger business. So with a business that's turning over $200 million, you might have more degrees of separation between a project manager and a director than you would do if it was one doing $5 million a year. What do the progression pathways look like for this person, and what can they expect to work towards over time? For some people, this doesn't matter, but for some people, they want to be involved in the daily operations, the growth of the business, so this might be important to them. This is going to be important to know in case your candidate does have, if that's their main driver, career progression. You need to tell them how they're going to progress through this business over time, what they can expect to work towards. If they do a good job, they could be in X position in 2 years. What are the working hours for this person, and is there any flexibility in their schedule? Now, depending on your industry, some industries have just set 9 to 5 working hours, Monday to Friday. Construction, for example, I know I keep harping back to that, but it's what I work in. So construction, a lot of businesses for certain positions expect their candidates to have Saturdays free. So if you're a site manager, you're expected to be available at least every other Saturday, sometimes all Saturdays. But for a PM, maybe not. What are you expecting to pay somebody in this role? Now, they're going to want to tell you a smaller figure here than they are actually willing to pay. It's just natural for, it's like going and buying a car and the car salesperson tells you, oh, what do you want to pay for this car? You're going to obviously say 30 grand if it's a 40 grand car. But gives you an opportunity to set their expectations as well. So they'll probably say, as little as possible, but then you get the opportunity to say, okay, well, what I'm seeing in the market currently is X, Y, Z, and you want to do the opposite of what they've done. You want to maybe set their expectations slightly on the higher level so that when you present the candidate, if they do need to negotiate, then you can, come somewhere in the middle and end up with a reasonable salary figure on the table. So if you're working on a position that is on average paying 130 grand in the market, you might tell them, look, what I'm seeing at the minute is 140 grand, sometimes 135. Salaries are a little bit inflated at the minute, but I'll try and get you someone for a reasonable rate. Does the position come with any other forms of compensation? Now, sometimes they neglect to mention it, but it might be that this position, it's standard for your industry to come with a vehicle or a phone or a laptop or travel allowance or paid lunches or bonuses. Ask the question, get clear on it, because there's no point in not knowing an extra form of remuneration if that's only a benefit to you. Have you interviewed anybody else for the role? If so, what were your thoughts on them? So this is interesting because if they've interviewed 2 people and they like both of them, they're probably going to make an offer, and this role might be filled in 2 days. In which case, is it worth going and spending time on? Probably not. So it might still be, and it might be that they're wanting to interview, maybe they've got a policy they have to interview 4 people or whatever it is. And if that is the case, then it's worth working on. But if they're literally about to offer someone for the position, then this is probably not a priority for you. Are you in a position to hire immediately if I find you the right person tomorrow? Now, you want to gauge this, because if they say yes and then they're slow to move on your candidate, you've got some recourse to go back to them and not call them out on it, because you don't want to be combative or rude, but you could say to them, hey, I've told the candidate that you were in the position to hire tomorrow based upon our conversation previously. They're chasing me up, even if they're not. They're chasing me up for feedback. I just want to know how to represent your business to them, because obviously I want to manage their expectations and I don't want to paint you in a bad light. What should I tell them? It puts it back on the business to then solve that problem for you, because it's like the candidate probably isn't asking you, what's going on, but you want to hurry things up. It's in your interest to hurry things up, so it just gives you that ability to do that. The specifics for a company. How many employees does the company currently have? That's self-explanatory. What is the org structure briefly? Now, you don't want them to fucking detail every single person within their business and what their responsibilities are, but you want to roughly have an idea, especially if you're hiring management candidates, of what the organizational structure is, because it gives them an idea of who they're going to be reporting into, how many people might be underneath them, what their progression pathway looks like, etc. What is the company's annual turnover? This might be a touchy one for smaller private businesses, but usually they're not going to have a problem telling you that, especially if they're doing well. A director's probably quite proud of it and wanting to give you that information. How do you find the retention of staff? If possible, what is the average tenure of the current employee? I've made a typo there. Gives you an idea around employee satisfaction, and if they have a current tenure of this average of 2 years, and you find them someone that's been at their business for 2 or 3 years, then they're probably going to be happy with that. If they have a current average tenure of 10 years, which is unlikely but very good if they do, and you give them a candidate that's been in their current role for a year, you can bet that they're going to ask you, why is this person looking to move on after a year? We want people for the long term. So it just gives you a baseline of being able to set expectations. How would you describe the culture of the business? This is a very open-ended question and could mean different things to different people. But if you ask that and just leave it open-ended, they're going to get talking and you're probably going to get an idea as to what their business looks like. If they ask you, what do you mean by that? You can break that down further and say, okay, well, the people that are in the positions currently? Like, what are their hobbies and interests? Are they family-oriented people? Do you want? I know you can't really. You can't discriminate, but if there's a trend of young, single, high performers who work 16 hours a day, it gives you a bit of an insight into the culture there compared to a business that, people are average age is 40 to 50 and they've got kids and they don't like to work Saturdays. It's a little bit of a cruisier vibe. You couldn't ever put age or, family situation in a job ad, but it gives you, it just starts to paint the picture for you. What, if anything, do you do differently to other businesses to enhance the culture? So it's, similar to the previous questions. They might have a strategy to build the culture. They might do, I've got a business that I work with that does fishing trips to Darwin every year. So just things like that. It just gives you some intangibles to speak about, some benefits to, being part of that community. Does the company pay bonuses or give any other forms of benefit to its employees? So this might come in the form of, like bonuses. We spoke about other forms of remuneration previously, but any other forms of benefits. So there's a business that I've worked with previously who, you'd hope you'd never want to claim this, but in the case of disability or impairment, your family gets paid out and you get paid out for 80 years. Your salary gets paid out for 80 years. So, it's essentially earnings cover if you ever get to a point where you can't work. It could be that they're an international business and that if you ever want to relocate, you can go and join a sister company and they will pay your relocation costs. Just details, like good detail. Is the business privately owned? What are the company goals for the next 5 years? So that will include growth. Are they planning to just stay steady? Like some businesses are more conservative than others. They're at a point where they're like, we're profitable, we're doing a good job, we're keeping our clients happy, we just want to stay steady. Streamlining operations. So maybe they're a bit big, maybe they want to actually narrow down and focus on the more profitable parts of their business. To know the goals over the next 5 years would be good because it shows that they're actually putting thought into it. So if a company says, well, I don't know, like keep working, it's not as good as if they say, hey, yeah, we've got a 5-year strategy. This is where we want to be. I work with a business at the moment that is currently a tier 3 builder that probably in the next 5 years, if I was to guess, will be competing with the tier 2 builders. So if you ask them their goals for the next 5 years, it might be grow the average project value from $25 million to $45 million, which is probably realistic over 5 years. Does the company plan to offer any new services or products in the near future? Ties into the previous question. Considerations. So this is an interesting one. Obviously, I'd love to find you a candidate that has 100% of the attributes that you are after. If I can't, what are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? So this is about expectation setting as well. You don't want to tell them, yep, I'm definitely going to go and find you someone who 100% fits the bill. I'm going to find you the perfect candidate. I'll call you tomorrow when I've found them. It's more about saying, look, I'm going to do my best to get you a good person for this role. What is mandatory for them to have and what aspects are great if I find them, but not necessarily compulsory. So it gives you an idea of what to focus on more than others. So if you've got, if you've got 3 or 4 criteria that they've given you, but they don't tell you that one's more important than the other, you may not be focusing your search in the right place. If I put a resume in front of you right now, what is it that you'd immediately look at? This just gives you an idea of what to highlight when you're presenting the candidate to the business. Different clients value different things. Some of them say, yep, I want someone to be here for the next 5 years. So tenure will be important to that client, more so than someone who is purely looking at project experience. If they've got a complex project that they're initially hiring for that has, really detailed aspects in a certain area, they might value the candidate having that exact experience way higher than their tenure. They might look at that as, look, I really need the right person for this job. If they leave after this job, then, not ideal, but whatever. Whereas others might not look at it like that. Have you dealt with recruiters in the past, and do you understand how it all works? Now, depending upon their answer to this question, that dictates where you take the conversation. So if they have worked with recruiters in the past, you can say something like, okay, great, so you'll be aware of the process then. Let me run you through the terms of business I work to. Provided you're happy with everything, is there any reason that you would not be able to get them signed and returned to me today so that I'm able to get straight to it? You position the question in that way because it's unlikely someone's going to say, yes, there is a reason that I can't do this for you. Like, it's a strange way to answer that question. They're probably going to go, no, that's fine. And then you're good. Now you've set the expectation with them that they are going to sign and return your terms of business. And because they've said yes, you can then follow them up tomorrow and say, hey, I didn't receive that email. Did you get the terms that I sent through? And it gives you the ability to put pressure on it a little bit, because the quicker you can get that back, the better. Otherwise, it's probably going to sit in their inbox. They won't want to take care of it until you've got them a candidate, and you just want them signed and returned. It makes doing business in the future a lot easier, and it gives you that level of cover if they ever did decide to go behind your back and take a candidate, or hopefully they're not going to, but it gives you that level of cover. If they haven't worked with recruiters before, similar conversation, but you can say, okay, great. Well, how it works is once we've received the signed TOB document back, we'll be in a position to start sending CVs over to you. Now, this positions it as like, look, I can give you what you want. I just need you to do this one thing for me. So they're going to go and prioritize taking care of that so that they can get what they want. You can say, I'll run you through the TOB document in a moment. Provided you're happy with everything in the terms, same thing. Is there any reason that you wouldn't be able to get them signed and returned? They're probably not going to say, yes, there's a reason I can't do that. If you were to ask them, hey, do you mind doing this today for me? They might say, oh, look, I'm a bit busy today, but I'll get onto it this week for you or something. And then it's just going to get pushed back. So try and get them out of the way as soon as possible.